and welcome to the Quiet Riot, where we talk film, television, and media. I'm Ainsley, and today we are discussing coming-of-age romantic comedy Gregory's Girl. Released in 1980, Gregory's Girl follows a star football player at his school who falls in an infatuation with a fellow footballer who just happens to try out for the male's football team. It is available for free on various platforms, all of which will be put in the description box below if you want to check it out. And if you are new here, I will be doing a little bit of a spoiler-free section before going into more of the deep dive, and I will let you know, and you'll know when that comes about. While Gregory's Girl is a coming-of-age romantic comedy, it is also a bit of a slice-of-life film for these teenagers in Glasgow. We also get to know some of their teachers and coaches a little bit, though the focus is more on the teenagers, specifically Gregory, played by Gordon John Sinclair, or John Gordon Sinclair as he is known about now, though he is credited as Gordon John Sinclair, which is his birth name in the film. I really enjoy Gregory's Girl for its authenticity. The fact that you have these teenagers playing teenagers, and a lot of them have worked together prior on the previous film by director-writer Brian Forsyth, or are a part of a theater company that was there in Glasgow for teenagers, and they all came to work on this film. Gregory is our main focus here, but we do get to know some more about his different friends as well as the girls at the school that he goes to, and not just the girl that he has like this first time infatuation with. There really is this kind of sense of just what it is to be a teenager, where you're constantly crushing and meeting new people, and that feeling of, though, this is the girl guy that I've got to be with, and then all of a sudden there's like another girl guy that you want to see. And so it's all about, crushes and infatuation and feeling like you're in love when, truly you're not, but this person is really fascinating to you. And at the beginning, you do see that Gregory, along with some of his friends, are being little peeping toms, and don't do that. But I find that a lot of times when you watch a movie or a television series that focuses a lot on teens or young adults, they seem to act as if they're either like the worst of the worst, or they're not necessarily cognizant with what they're doing necessarily. And I think it really comes from this point of trying to be more entertaining than really capturing what it is to be a teenager, what it is to be infatuated and experience a crush, and how that can kind of interfere with other aspects of your life and friendships and family life, and everything comes on having to create this much more elaborate story. And that's why I'm really interested in coming of age films, especially ones that are done very well like Gregory's Girl is that it focuses a lot on these changing tides and kind of a snippet of this teenager's life, instead of creating this overtly elaborate story. And this is not to say that in any sense I don't sometimes enjoying that. I am somebody who was, a teenager in the 2000s, and there was a lot more of these crazy, ridiculous stories, and there were in the 90s and 80s as well. And 80s is really where these kind of films started to blossom, and I find that Gregory's Girl is just this really great Gregory's Girl has a much more solid, authentic foundation that if you're watching it as an adult, you look at this and it's kind of like looking back onto your own time as a teenager. Now, of course, all of our experiences are differently. This film is set in Glasgow. It's very working class, and there's just, there are a bunch of city kids just walking around. Everybody, depending on their own experiences in life, the decade in which they were, raised, the decade in which they were a teenager, it's all going to be their own experience. But I do realize the internet has taught me anything, is that there's certain universal experiences in just the way that, how different things have changed, like how certain aspects of technology has changed the way a teenager may experience life now, and they're having very universal experiences with teenagers elsewhere. That was something a lot of us that were teenagers in the 2000s experienced, and vice versa. So, but I also think that going through life, even though your experiences may be changing, there are still certain things that are pretty universal, and those feelings of crushes and infatuation and feeling as if, you know, it's all about now and there's not so much that you can see in the future is something that doesn't really change. And though Gregory's Girl is in fact, you know, this kind of silly romantic comedy, it captures that very well of what it means to be a teenager. At the start, Gregory's Girl introduces us to Gregory and a few of his friends as they are peeping in on a woman who is changing. There isn't a lot of nudity in this film, but we do get some nudity here. But I do like that this film doesn't focus on making these to be these like perfect kids. Oftentimes I find that certain films will say these are the good boys, these are the bad boys. This one is just showing us a slice of life in the world of Gregory and his friends. One of my favorite aspects of this movie is the relationship between Gregory and his sister. His sister seems to be someone who's a bit of an old soul, or she knows a lot more than maybe kids of her age do. She seems like she's maybe about 11, 12 years old, and she's very close with her brother. We don't get to see his parents a lot in this, though we do get to see his father at some point, and I kind of like this aspect of, oh yes, the parents are present and they are a part of Gregory's life, but Gregory, of course, being a teenager, is really in and out of the house a lot. He plays football, he goes out with his friends, and so his family just isn't seeing his as much, but he does have this very solid relationship with his younger sister, and while he's protective of her, she also seems to be very protective of him and feels like she needs to help him be this much more like alluring it's such a weird thing to say, but like alluring person to girls. Like she can help him get the ladies. But there's just like this sweet innocence of their relationship, and there's also this sweet innocence just about Gregory, and not in this way where you're infantilizing him, but just that he is a 17-year-old boy. He's still a kid. Yes, he'll be an adult soon, but he's still a kid. He's still a child. He's in school, he plays football, he's really good at playing football, and then this young girl, his fellow teenager, comes into his life, and it's almost as if it's derailed. And even as adults, we can still be very over dramatic, but there's something very specific about that teenage over dramatization of life and of feelings, and you know, this is it. I see this person, I love them. And I think that oftentimes that is played very heavily for jokes and ha ha ha, let's laugh at stupid teenagers. And something about this movie is just a lot more sympathetic. I find that a movie that kind of does that balance very well for me is Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's funny and dramatic, and it shows kind of a very like sad reality for teenagers at that time, and teenagers as well, of just, you know, certain kids trying to act tough, certain kids working way too hard, certain kids, you know, kind of over exaggerating about their love life or sex life, and that kind of does that incredible balance by being very much this 80s movie that in certain aspects will go over the top, but also has that very grounded feeling to it in the same way that Gregory's Girl does. Gregory's Girl is, of course, a much lower budget, a much smaller cast, it's a lot more intimate, but I would say if you do like kind of that very grounded aspect of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, you will probably really like Gregory's Girl as well, or at least I think you would They're better if you know to give it a chance and see if you'll like it.
Gregory's Girl and Fast Times are two very different films, but where they intersect is their focus on a real teenage experience. Fast Times through multiple characters, and Gregory's Girl through Gregory. If I were to compare Gregory to a character in Fast Times, it would be Stacey Hamilton, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh. Both are a little awkward and going through a similar change, though Stacey's takes a far more serious turn.
Gregory is very much a relatable character in his awkwardness. He is going through a transition in his life, as we all do at that time period, where you're a kid, but you know, eventually the world is telling you that you're an adult. But that at this point of his life, you still feel as if everything's very much in the now, as when you're an adult, for the most part, you tend to be able to look ahead a lot more. And in this movie, you feel that very much with the character of Gregory. And to me, personally, what makes this film really funny is it is very much, you know, Glaswegian Scottish humor. Forsyth himself is Scottish. You've got a lot of, you know, young Scottish actors and Scottish character actors in this film. There's an actor you'll know from the series Taggart, if you've ever seen it. And some of these actors as well went on to have bigger careers, including our star John Gordon Sinclair, who plays Gregory. And he is so good in this role. Really a kid at the time of making this. He's tall and lanky, so he really plays that awkwardness very well. Again, if I say there's one thing that really makes this film stands out, it's how authentic it is to being an awkward teen, and being an awkward teen who is kind of, you know, who's experiencing an infatuation, a really big crush on someone, and the how this movie grounds itself in reality and teenhood. Dee Hepburn stars as Dorothy, a young footballer who wants to try out for the football team. So it definitely deals with some of that sexism and misogyny that is just rampant in sports. Whether you're a teenager in high school or you're an adult, we see it every day. We still see it. And I do like that that's tackled a bit, and I also like that we get to see Deborah really show herself and show her stuff. Apparently, Deborah actually wears her sister's shorts in this, and the movie was at such a low budget that a lot of these kids and just the actors in general were wearing their own clothes, or clothes that they ended up borrowing or purchasing for the film. The film was pretty low budget, being made for $200,000, though it was a very successful film at the time of its release and has gone on to be a cult classic. It had a box office of 1 million USD with a worldwide grossing of 25.8 million. Many of the young cast members were members of the Glasgow Youth Theatre. Apparently this film was redubbed upon its initial release in the US. I don't know if it was also, you know, done elsewhere, or if like the redubbing, I don't know. All I know is it said for American theaters, it was redubbed with much more like anglicized Scottish dialects, ones that are, I guess, a lot more easier on the American ears. I didn't find it that difficult to understand. Granted, I watch a lot of television from multiple countries across the world, as well as films, and I think my ear just quickly adjusts. I'm not saying that your ear may not have some trouble adjusting, but I don't think, you know, it was necessary to do that. But apparently this original redubbing, as well as just the actual dialogue and everything spoken by these characters, is available on the MGM re-release of this movie. But I would just say, if you want a more authentic experience watching this movie, watch it, you know, with its regular Glaswegian dialect, and put some subtitles on. There is a chip bar that is frequented by the characters in this film, and apparently that chip bar is owned by a member of the Capaldi family, and I'm sure that you were picturing Peter Capaldi as I say this, and maybe you're picturing Louis Capaldi, quite possibly. The film was written and directed by Bill Forsyth, who is probably best known today for his work in Local Hero. Cinematography was done by Michael Coulter. I really do like the cinematography of this. A lot of the cinematography editing that is done by John Gow and music by Colin Tolley is simple, and that is in the nicest way possible. The simplicity of these films adds to the authenticity of it, which adds to the overall groundness of the script and the film itself. These actors are teenagers playing teenagers, which also adds to the authenticity of it. And you have like you get that feeling of like, oh, you know, you're just kind of moving from person to person, you're crushing, all of that jazz, and you're not always being your smartest in the way that you're doing things. And I find that that comes into play a lot. There's my favorite kind of moment through this is when I was about to call him, wait, hang on. Gregory, it's the name is Gregory's girl, and I was forgetting his name. Gregory and Deborah are supposed to meet, and we know, you know, there's something going on, and he ends up like meeting with this other girl. They're talking for a while, and then he ends up meeting with the other girl. And I find like, I don't know if this is necessarily the intention, but I believe that Gregory's girl is definitely just supposed to, like, you know, it's meant to represent, oh, this one girl that he is infatuated with, and there's like this other girl that he kind of ends up with at the end. And Gregory's girl is also, you know, his little sister, this other girl that he's close to. And I feel so more like the girl is supposed to just represent the girls that are in Gregory's life. And while a big part of the story is, of course, his love and infatuation for Deborah, I do kind of think that that title goes a little bit further to discuss his overall relationships with girls throughout this movie, whether romantic, platonically, and familial. American film critic Roger Ebert liked the film's direction and wrote, Bill Forsyth's Gregory's Girl is a charming, innocent, very fun little movie about the weird kid. The movie contains so much wisdom about being alive and teenage and vulnerable that maybe it would even be painful for a teenager to see it. Maybe only grown-ups should see this movie. You know, people who have gotten over the pains of unrequited love. On sneak previews, Ebert and Gene Siskel gave it 2 yes votes, with both critics praising the film's honest depiction of the awkwardness of adolescence. The staff of Variety liked the work of the young cast and Forsyth's direction and wrote, filmmaker Bill Forsyth, whose friendly, unmalicious approach recalls that of Renee Claire, is concerned with young students, in particular a soccer team goalie Gregory seeking out the opposite sex. As Gregory, John Gordon Sinclair is adept at physical comedy. Hepburn is properly enigmatic as the object of his desire, with ensemble approach given Greg's precocious 10-year-old sister, played by Alison Forster, a key femme role. Critic Richard Scorman wrote, Forsyth does a good job of making light of the tender part in Gregory's teenage psyche, and his friends and little sister in particular are quirky and lovable. Unlike the film's American counterparts, Gregory's Girl is refreshingly free of mean-spirited characters and horny young stuns bemoaning their virginity. The review agitator Rotten Tomatoes, which we barely talk about on this channel for, I think, fairly obvious reasons, did say that is reported that 96% of critics gave the film a positive review based on a total of 23 reviews. The film has been reappraised, and in a retrospective appraisal of the film 40 years after its release, Dr. Johnny Murray, senior lecturer in film and visual culture at Edinburgh College of Art, was quoted in the Scotsman as saying, Gregory's Girl is one of cinema's true portrayals of the state of adolescence, a totally universal theme which only a few other filmmakers have been able to capture so brilliantly. Bill managed to capture not just what that looks like, but what that feels like. I would say a lot of critics, and that includes just regular audience members, seem to have the same idea that this film has an authentic portrayal of teenage life and adolescence. Of course, this is set in an area of Scotland, but a lot of what these, you know, they're dealing with is unrequited love, the pain of unrequited love, the awkwardness in terms of just, you know, being a teenager, and the overall uncomfortable nature of being a teenager, and just showing you this view of what adolescence is like. And that goes through every year, decade, and century. And while there may be differences between our individual experiences, there is that awkwardness that lives in us all, whether it can be seen by the general public or not. And yes, Gregory's awkwardness can be seen thanks to his extremely tall, thin figure. He's gangly, he's definitely awkward, a bit clumsy, but he's also just endearing because he really speaks to the awkward teenager in us all, and we can look back at those times and cringe together. John Gordon Sinclair's performance as Gregory is probably the most standout moment of this, but his relationships with the other characters and the performances of the other actors stand out as well. When you consider the kind of awkward, sexist nature of the coach who doesn't really want to let a girl on his team. Does that shock you? No. But there's also that expectations of what these coaches have. Like, it's still something that's dealt with. Oh, girls are not supposed to play with boys and all that stupid stuff is dealt with. It is here. Like, there's not just these little vignettes going through where things are not properly dealt with. You know, this girl is a fantastic player. She just happens to be a girl and she makes it on the team, and she's a cool girl, and you can really see why Gregory is infatuated with her. But while she is a cool girl and she is a girl who's really into sports, she's not one of those not like other girls. She's also very much a girl's girl. And she's also not like a mean girl. And none of these characters are mean-spirited. None of these characters are malicious, and they're not always doing the good thing or the right thing, but they're also not being like just like dumb bad boys. They're supposed to like be a part of the entertainment value of a film. They want to experience the same success that Gregory seems to be having with girls. They're a bit envious of it, and they decide that they want to go to Caracas. And there is a really big scene. It's like that, I think it's the ending scene actually, and they're holding up a sign. They want to hitchhike to Caracas. And where's Caracas, you may ask if you don't know where Caracas is? Venezuela. Apparently, these two teenagers, they want to go to Caracas because the women greatly outnumber, or at least they've heard that women greatly outnumber men, and they believe they'll have a much better chance with girls and women if they go to Caracas or just any place where there's a lot more women. It's just crazy. Like, I think that definitely adds to the comedic side of this, of them just kind of watching their friend in this moment where he seems to be having these dates with these multiple girls all within the same day, and they're, you know, feeling kind of bummed. They want to experience this as well. So why not just hitchhike to Caracas? Why not? All of these characters are very authentic to being young, being a teenager. You know, this is kind of your last hurrah before. I'll be right there, baby. This is kind of your last hurrah before you enter adulthood and everything kind of goes to hell. They're just wanting to experience some of that good, you know, teenage life with a girlfriend or a gal, or, you know, they want to experience some of Gregory's newfound success with the ladies. So why not head down to Caracas? Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch and or listen. Gregory's Girl is a fun little cult classic, coming of age, slice of life, romantic comedy about what it is to be an awkward teenager. Its universal feelings is authentic in the way it is to be a teenager experiencing unrequited love, infatuation, crushes, and what it feels to just not have any luck with the opposite sex and anyone that you may be attracted to. Also deals with some very real issues of what it is to be a teenage girl who happens to like things that are considered more masculine, or, you know, wants to be able to participate in sports in which there is no team that features, you know, your own sex or gender. In this case, for the character of Deborah, there is no female team. And it focuses on just, kind of what it is to see your friend experiencing some success in an area that you yourself are not experiencing any success in. And that adds to the very authentic and awkward nature of this movie. I highly recommend checking it out. It doesn't matter if you're a teenager yourself, if you're an adult. I think even if you're peeking back into 1980, you're gonna find something to awkwardly relate to, cringe to, and enjoy. If you have any requests or recommendations for the channel, please let me know in the comments below. If you've seen Gregory's Girl, let me know your thoughts on it, and I will make sure to post. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!